Hey everyone, it's Amy, your voice of reason. Because JF is so busy that we blew through our entire bank of written episodes, the next episode of Season 3 of Aquillow will be postponed until next week. In the meantime, please enjoy this sample of Aquillow Kitchen, the bonus episodes that our Patreon backers receive. Both JF and I are very sorry for the inconvenience, and we hope that you can forgive us. Aquillow Kitchen.
Hello everyone, I'm JF Dubois. I am the Aquillow Writer of Wrong, and
I am Amy Frost, the voice of reason. What we're here to do is, for you Patreon backers, first of all, thank you so much. But we wanted to do little commentary tracks so that you can kind of hear some of the conversation that we have behind the scenes of all of these episodes.
yeah. However, in lieu of having actual time travel where we can go back and record the actual conversations, which are probably not, they're not all right for a general audience, right? I mean,
generally not.
There's a lot of swearing on my part. We figured like we re-listened to the episode and we're just gonna like talk about each episode one at a time and sort of like the thinking that went behind it.
Yeah, and sort of how it fits in to the story at large. So in case you didn't already know, in case you are somehow new here, there are going to be spoilers. Guaranteed. We will keep the spoilers within whatever season we are discussing. So if you have only listened to season 1 in its entirety, you are safe here. I promise, she said.
No, I'll keep you on track. I may not be very good at voicing characters like you, but I do have a firm grasp of what I did within each season. So if you start boiling over, yeah. But you should, if you're a listener, you should make sure that you've listened to the entirety of season 1.
Yes.
Because we are going to talk about like certain things like foreshadowing.
Yeah, and how it fits in.
Right.
So today we're going to talk about Chapter 1, Gravestones to Milestones.
So already with the title, do we want to talk about how we come up with titles?
Is it poorly? Because it's generally poorly.
I like the procedure that I go through working for titles because it's such a low priority. Even just as a writer of published books and novels, here's a little thing that I don't know if I've told this many times on podcasts or in public, but the 2 of my published works, The Life Engineered and A God in the Shed, were published under their working titles, not their final titles. We've never gone through any brainstorming. I created these working titles because I needed to put something, for file names and things. Yep. And that's how they got submitted to the publisher. It's how they went through their pre-sales, and no one ever bothered to say, those are not good, let's change them. So here we are.
I think we've only discussed, we used to be a lot more precious about our titles and episode descriptions than we are now, which is somewhere near the end of season 2 in real life. So I think we were a little more precious back in season 1, episode 1.
We were, yes. For the Gravestones to Milestones is, to me, it's one of my favorite titles to begin with, because it's very descriptive of what we wanted the episode to be about. We did come up with it towards the end of just before we send it out, before you recorded, which, I mean, we did agonize over it, and we did in season 1 agonize over a lot of the titles, and it feels like in season 2 we're not, because I have, and maybe in season 3 it's going to be completely different, but in season 2 I feel I have such a clear voice for what I want these titles to be.
Yeah.
So they come to me fairly easily.
We also have a lot clearer idea of what we're doing here overall than we did in season 1, episode 1, certainly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But But even then, like, and this is something that's going to be interesting to explore in these commentaries, is I go into season 1, episode 1 with hours of work. Like, I've done the plotting for the entire season at that point. I've written at least 1 or 2 drafts of the first episode. I've gone through all my character development. So I walk into these with a lot of baggage. So when I go down to sit down and create a title, it's a lot more convoluted. Meanwhile, all you have is a script and the outline of the season.
Well, yeah, no. So actually, I mean, I had a vague, let's talk about this for a hot second. I had a vague idea, like, of the overarching story of season 1, but I didn't sit and read an outline until we were about 3 or 4 episodes in.
Right, because here's another insight into how I do things. I write my outlines by hand.
Yeah.
Because I very often will just circle a bunch of things, take notes in the margins, and just I do this very analog and very weird. It's a lot of contrast compared to how digital I am when I'm actually working on a script or a manuscript.
Right.
So I didn't have anything I could conveniently send you. Even photos of my pages of chicken scratches would have meant nothing.
Yeah.
To the human eye. So it's not until you came up to Montreal and you and I we went out for lunch and you got to sit down and actually go through the outline to check out what I was doing. And it's a lot in season 1 because back then I barely knew who Miriam was. You had no idea who Olivia and Gulliver, Helen Edna and Notary Public was.
Neither of us anticipated Helen Edna Notary Public becoming the force of nature that she turned into.
And it's so much fun to listen to the first episode.
Yep.
Because I did not remember how early in the season.
Early.
She gets introduced and you get sort of already a hint of who she is before she ever even shows up. And I think I get it now. I think I like when listeners were saying, "Oh yeah, we really love Helen Edna." Why?
Really?
I think she's
neat,
she's just
but Helen Edna, Notary Public. I like to take a little credit for how much people like Helen Edna.
Oh no, absolutely. There's none of these characters come to life in this podcast format without whatever you breathe into them.
And that's been one of the things for both of us, right? Is like a lot of, and especially season 1, but it keeps going because we keep adding new characters. But a lot of season 1 was, so you've got a fairly clear picture in your head of who these characters are. I read it and interpret them in entirely my own way and read it that way, which then alters how you perceive them, and back and forth we go.
Yeah, and then I need to make adjustments because if a character comes off different than what I imagined, I need to sort of veer in this or that direction.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit like we haven't encountered, like, this is just episode 1, so obviously we haven't like met Olivia Fig, but she came off very different from what I expected, but even then kind of rolling into what I want to do with the character.
So this episode is interesting because other than Miriam, all the characters that we interact with don't show up a whole lot after that.
No, they don't, but very few of them vanish completely.
Oh, no, not at all. But it does set like weird expectations for the season based off of, oh, okay, all right, so Miriam got it, and Trevor apparently, and that boyfriend stealing bitch Cindy, yeah, okay, got it.
And have you noticed that we've never met Trevor?
We've never met Trevor. We know he came to the hospital though.
We do,
but that's it. We don't meet him. That's it.
Like,
that's fine.
We've never met Trevor. Like most of Miriam's earlier antagonists have never actually been in the show.
Yeah.
Neither Trevor or Chef Gagnon have ever shown up.
It's true.
And
She's got new problems.
She's got much worse problems. Which is fun because it's nice to work with Miriam's background of having kind of these little traumas introduced in the first episode and seeing how she's contrasting, being thrown out of school and losing her cheating boyfriend and all that. She's got all these traumas and she has to contrast them with demons and stuff.
Yeah, that boyfriend stealing bitch Cindy really kind of pales in comparison to long black claws scraping against
a window.
Against a window.
Or, immortal raccoons or whatever. It's so and that's one thing that's been kind of interesting to keep realistic in further episode is how do I write this character so that she's still carrying this baggage and who she isn't just completely obscured by what's around her, but still doesn't make her seem like she doesn't demons, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's been a balancing act.
So one of the fun things that I realized going back to listen now so far away, because I've actually not listened to any of these episodes since I finished editing them and put them out. So I have not listened to this episode since it came out. And it was being reminded of how cocky Miriam was. To the point where I have one of my friends who listens to the show in the beginning did not like Miriam.
That was planned.
Which I was heartbroken about that because this character is very near and dear to me. And I was heartbroken about that. And now I'm going back and listening and going, yeah, no, she's awful.
She's not awful.
No,
but
she's not.
When we went in, and this was actually because Miriam is inspired by you in the sense that like very, very creative, extremely talented person, like obviously loves cooking, but also hasn't gotten the breaks she deserves. But it was important for me for you to know that inspired did not mean carbon copy because I knew I was going to make Miriam a very cocky character and I didn't want to write a flawless sort of like I didn't want to write a flawless Mary Sue. I didn't want a character that just I didn't want her to be like a power fantasy. I want her to be flawed. One of her flaws is, and we play on that a lot, like her confidence, which part of her confidence is solid and which is built on shaky ground is very much part of who Miriam is. Like she is an incredible cook. She knows she's an incredible cook.
Yep.
But she also has other flaws that she's very aware of. And writing those have been very interesting. But yeah,
Miriam's derision of Miami I found particularly funny.
Oh wait, remind me. I just listened.
Yeah, so she's talking about how all right, well, so she can't go to school, but if she can, when she gets the letter from Helen Edna Notary Public, if she can sell the cafe, then maybe she can pay off her loans and maybe she can eat, maybe it'll even be enough that she can study abroad in New York or LA or even Miami if that's what it takes to be cooking again.
All right,
Miami is a great food city in and of itself, but I understand it not being Miriam's jam.
Here's the thing, right? So I didn't really go through like a long list or did like Google search worst city to learn cooking in because I don't think I would have gotten very many hits. So I went with Miami because if you think food from Miami, you mostly probably associate it with like cruise ships or which is very much me as an author playing on people's expectations much more than fact. Right. Because some of the best food I've had have been on cruise ships. The food on Royal Caribbean ships is amazing. It's second to none. But that being said, if you're talking about going to cooking school and you're talking about LA and New York and Paris, and then you mention Miami, again, like the expectations
even just stylistically, it is infinitely different.
Right,
right.
Like
Miami, like the high cuisine of Miami is predominantly Cuban based, which is amazing and delicious. But I get it. not being Miriam's jam.
Yeah, but then if I would have talked about, like, because that's the thing, right? Because if you think of Miami cuisine, you think Cuban based. But if I'm going to learn how to do Cuban cuisine, I'll go to Havana.
Good. Yeah, exactly.
Which may not be a thing for people in the U.S., but in Canada, it is.
Yeah.
I don't know about cooking's cool in Havana, but like we can go to Cuba.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, and there's a lot of little things like that. Because one thing that came up to me, like going back a bit to the idea of threads we didn't really follow up on, like Miriam's cockiness we did, but one of the things I mentioned is that she mentions hating her parents.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we do follow it up a little bit. I think it's a little more in season 2 though, so I don't want to go too far, but yeah, we don't talk a lot about her hating her parents.
We don't talk much about her family. I mean,
not in season 1.
Not in
more in
season
season 2.
So they're mentioned a bit at the end. They do visit her at a hospital. And they're mentioned in the holiday special in season 2. Even season 2, it's mostly a bunch of recollections and flashbacks. So her family hasn't been a huge part except for her brother.
Yeah.
But it's the whole, because I listened to that and I went, I haven't really
do we
haven't really
we deal with that,
fleshed that out, like.
Well, but it works out though because of the way that the season ends. Like the fact that Miriam can just pick up and go without concern for her family, like I get that. Like she's not, like I couldn't just pick up and go. What would my mom do?
Right. No, I need, obviously, like, to have this sort of new life, found family type of adventure for Miriam, where she's found her Aquilo mom and Aquilo dad, if you will. It's like I couldn't have her have too many deep ties into like her past and her family, or if I did, like they needed to be things that could be severed and stretched, if you will.
Yeah, it also really plays off that, like, by the time that letter lands in her hands, she doesn't have a whole lot going for her.
Right. And
she barely has a job. She got kicked out of school. Trevor gone, but not. She has nowhere to go.
Right. Like, I mean, you can clearly see, especially in hindsight, that episode 1 is built so that, you know, Miriam has no choice but to at least give Aquilo a shot.
Right.
Like you say, like
she has nothing to lose.
Yeah, and that's why the mention of her hating her parents, it may not be like a deep-seated hate, like she doesn't necessarily want them dead or anything, but the idea of possibly moving back in with them is loathsome. Like, it has to be something that's absolutely unpalatable. She would rather move to a tiny village she's never heard of.
Right.
Because otherwise it's not realistic. Like moving in with your parents, if you get along with them, like it's not great for the ego, but if it gives you a fresh start, it's better than nothing, right?
Yep.
But yep. I couldn't give Miriam that door out. Like she couldn't. No, it's Aquilo or nothing, girl.
So I like this view of Aquilo that Miriam has before she actually goes there based off of her very brief internet search, because it's funny knowing what I know now about Aquilo. So like one of the things that she says is that like, oh, it's mentioned more than I would have expected and not for their Apple Festival. Except once we meet Olivia, I'm betting the Apple Festival is dynamite.
Oh, yeah, that is absolutely not an accident on my part. Like there's that was one of the things, like there's a lot of little seeds in there, apple seeds, if you will. Because I knew most of the characters going in. So like the Apple Festival is not an accident. The and
then she talks about the provincial police and how like you couldn't hope for Aquilo to have its own police force. No, they have two.
Right?
Which, like, this is all stuff that, like, even though I knew things that, like, I knew some of what was coming down, like, I definitely didn't notice any of it at the time. Now I'm going back and I'm like, oh, that's funny. Well done.
So here's one of my questions too. Like, I wanted to quiz you a bit on that.
Yeah.
Episode 1, I figured like we had talked about who Miriam was going to be, but the other characters, when you first got to them, so what was your process? Like how, like I'm giving you a character that's probably never going to show up again, Cindy. What's your process into how you're going to voice this one off?
All right. So first of all, my voice work in these early episodes is not stellar. I mean, it's fine, but it's not like in the beginning there was this delicate balance that we were working with, because first of all, we're doing this sort of balance between radio drama and audiobook, and then it's all right, well, how over the top do we go, and like trying to tone that back, which until Orleans shows up I was very like, let's not go too far, and then Orleans shows up and I just threw all of that out the window and went for broke. But so Cindy, all right, well, as a 39-year-old woman, I've known a Cindy or two in my day, and so it's really not hard to like understand where Miriam's coming from in this. And it's also like this weird balance because it's told from Miriam's perspective, right? So while it is Cindy's voice, it's Miriam's idea of how Cindy sounds. So honestly, I probably could have made her a little more, you know, it'll be okay. But I didn't, like, episode 1, I didn't own it enough to be able to do something like that.
Right. But I think it kind of works out because in a way, even Miriam is sort of like, she hates her, but does not hate her.
I mean,
like,
yeah.
Because in a way, yeah, she's the worst person ever to be there, but she's there.
Something.
Yeah.
It's an any port in a storm scenario
Right.
for poor Miriam.
Yeah, which again is all the more reason for her to actually go to Aquilo.
Yeah.
I noticed how much flowery some of my descriptions were, and one of the questions I had was, should I go back to that a little? I do miss some of it.
I mean, I think that's definitely a thing that we could get back to. But I think it also has to do a little bit with Miriam's perspective, right? I mean, here, she's got sort of nothing else to do but notice things. And honestly, I think some of season 2 you got pretty flowery. But like the description of the envelope, it still like tugs my heart. It's one of my favorite things. Like, I love that.
But see, this is exactly also. Well, we'll get to it when we get to season to episode 2 here. But yeah, I mean, the envelope has. This is something I feel maybe is a failing. It's good to go back to listen to these, but the envelope has more personality than some of the patrons of the Aquilo Cafe later in the season or in season 2. and I feel like maybe I should go back and make sure that that everyone gets the same care and treatment.
Well, I think that a lot of that comes again where this is Miriam's perspective. So while she knows who these people are, if they're not registering as an important part of, her life right in this moment, because she is very often forced to live right now and not, 5 minutes in the future. Like if they're not that important to her right this second, she doesn't notice everything.
Right. I don't know how long I want to use this as an excuse. Like obviously like that's the thing about this episode 1 is that a lot of the things are very heightened. Like that envelope is like it's super important.
Yep.
Receiving that envelope absolutely changes everything about Miriam's life.
Yes.
So yeah, I get what you're saying, and I completely agree with the idea that like she's not necessarily going to notice everyone that comes in for a cup of coffee the same way she needs to notice and register this envelope. Also, this envelope is like it's Helen Edna's introduction in a very concrete way, so you can't rush through that.
And we vaguely, at the very end, at least become aware of Gulliver. In so much as he answers her answers her little post on the commuter website and is like, yeah, I'm going to Aquilo. I'll see you there, 7 a.m. And she's like, he's just going to kill me. And then says, great, I'll be there. Let's go. Because she's a romantic.
Right. We didn't even talk about this sort of
the bookend lines.
This ongoing thread
for episode 1.
Yeah, I was happy with that because I feel that it really introduces Miriam well.
It does, absolutely.
If I were to go back to who she is as a core, and it's in line with her cockiness. She's got this image of herself as being like she's a romantic. She likes to these flights of fancy, and part of these flights of fancies is having these restaurants and being this world class, world notoriety chef. And you don't go into these fantasies. You don't live that kind of romantic delusion if you don't have a certain amount of confidence in what you're capable of. Like you're not going to say, "Oh, I'm going to be a world-class chef. If ever I can figure out how to make omelets."
Yeah.
You have to have that level of self-confidence.
The fillet knife is the other sort of thread that runs all the way through the season in a weird way.
What are you referring
to? She packs her fillet knife first thing. And then isn't it at the end, unless I'm like totally confused, in which case I will have to edit all of this out. And then isn't it at the end of the season, doesn't it wind up back in her knife block? Or is that season 2?
I believe it does wind up. Now you got me confused. I'm pretty sure it does wind up in her knife block at the Aquilo Cafe at the end. But I don't think it's made a very big deal of it. But it does. I mean, it does show up in season 2, and I don't think that's much of a spoiler to say. But
I like the fillet knife as a thing.
Yeah, let's just say
it's not a fillet. Like, I don't know how much you guys cook, but a fillet knife is small and portable, and not your most deadly weapon in the kitchen.
But if there's a knife that you're gonna keep absolutely razor sharp, also it's the most vicious looking knife. Like you've got like a chef knife looks big and menacing. It looks like it's the workhorse of your knives. But a fillet knife, it looks like it's meant to hurt.
That's true.
Like you see that. And it's the first time you've never seen a fillet knife. You don't know much about medical equipment. And if I ask you if that's for the OR or the kitchen, you might flip a coin.
Yeah, you might not know. That's fair.
So, yeah, that's why I went with fillet knife. Also, to fillet properly and do it, I don't know why my voice broke like I'm a 14-year-old there. But, filleting requires a lot of skill.
Yep.
Like, you can chop onions pretty quick with a chef's knife, but if you want to fillet a fish quickly and efficiently without wasting too much meat, you're gonna have to practice.
And so we leave Miriam planning to go to Aquilo, a small town she's never heard of, to pick up her inheritance from a relative she's never heard of, with a man who answered her ad she's never heard of.
And that's why she's a romantic, because she's willing to go on adventures.
I think that basically wraps up everything we have for chapter 1.
Yeah, it's a good intro to these commentaries.
It's tempting for me to tell you everything, absolutely every little thing that I would do completely differently were I to sit down and record this episode again today, but I will refrain.
I don't know that I would do much differently writing-wise.
The writing is good. Some of my production work is questionable.
How should I say? It depends what you mean by that. Was it perfect? Of course not. Neither was my writing. But your production was better than 99% of other podcasts. even fiction podcasts I've listened to.
Oh,
So I want to encourage you to always improve, but never believe that you're not already doing fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for listening to these commentary tracks. This was our first try at this. I hope you're enjoying it. Thank you for joining our Patreon. Look at our Patreon for any other bonuses that we might add. We're still kind of flexing on that. And join us again for our commentary on Season 1, Chapter 2.
Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubeau and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.